Thanks for joining us for CBN News Today. I'm Caitlin Burke.
And I'm Ephraim Graham. Another winter wallop has turned deadly. This latest blast of back-to-back snowstorms has buried much of the Midwest and the Northeast, leaving at least 7 people dead and hammering much of the country with Arctic temperatures. Heather Sells has more on the winter mess.
More than 40 inches of snow have blanketed Boston in the last 7 days, a new record for a city that's no stranger to winter weather. Schools are closed, and even worse, the mayor has postponed the victory parade for the New England Patriots until tomorrow.
We're asking people, if you can, stay off the roads, try and take public transportation.
Along the coast in Massachusetts, high winds and waves are battering homes already damaged from last week's storm. 2 people have died on ice-covered roads in Rye, New York. In New York City, icy tracks brought this subway line and its commuters to a stop. And snow and salt seeping into electrical systems blew this manhole cover 25 feet into the air, injuring 1 person. In the Midwest, people are also digging out from record-breaking snow. The city of LaPorte, Indiana got 20 inches. Chicago got 19, and a massive pileup on the Tri-State Tollway. Thankfully, only minor injuries here. In Toledo, Ohio, the mayor is recovering from a heart attack that happened while he was checking on the roads. He crashed into a pole, and some Good Samaritans rushed to his aid, not even knowing who was hurt.
I was banging on the window. He wouldn't respond. 911 said we need to break the window and get him out.
Just getting the mail out will be a challenge in many Midwest and Northeast cities today. There's concern around plunging temperatures that will bring minus 20-degree wind chills in Pennsylvania, New York, and New England. Forecasters say something called flash freezing could also make roads dangerously slippery in areas that saw rain and slush before freezing temperatures. Heather Sells, CBN News.
A group of nuns is facing a legal battle over the birth control mandate in Obamacare. The nuns run the Eternal World Television Network, or EWTN. They're heading to court tomorrow because they object to the mandate, which would force them to provide health insurance for drugs that may cause abortions. The Becket Fund for Religious Liberty is representing the nuns in the case. They point out the Supreme Court has already ruled against the Obama administration's contraception mandate.
They lost 3 times at the U.S. Supreme Court in front regarding this issue of the abortifacient mandate, where they were trying to force ministries and family-run, faith-based businesses to provide abortion and contraceptive drugs in their health insurance policies. They lost in the Little Sisters of the Poor case at the beginning of the year last year. They lost in the Hobby Lobby case, and they lost again in the Wheaton College case.
If they don't win their case, the nuns at EWTN face millions of dollars in IRS fines.
President Obama is hoping to gain support for the Affordable Care Act today by putting its beneficiaries on display at the White House. The president is scheduled to meet with 10 Americans from across the country who say the new health care laws have helped them. The move comes as a bill to replace Obamacare faces a House vote tonight. President Obama is already threatening to veto that bill.
From healthcare to our nation's budget, today President Obama's $4 trillion spending plan is being analyzed. It's a spending plan that highlights his fourth quarter agenda, but conservatives are calling it reckless. White House correspondent Jennifer Wishon explains.
President Obama's ambitious $4 trillion budget is now in the hands of Congress. He calls it middle-class economics.
It helps working families' paychecks go farther by treating things like paid sick leave and child care as the economic priorities that they are.
To do that, the president proposes raising $1.5 trillion in new taxes on high-earning taxpayers and corporations, including giving America the distinction of having the highest estate tax in the world. But according to the Urban Institute and Brookings Institution, 70% of middle-class families making between $50,000 and $70,000 a year would see no change in their tax bills. Instead of middle-class economics, some conservatives are calling it envy economics. Stephen Moore is chief economist for the Heritage Foundation.
I think this was not a budget. This was a social statement by the president. It was a political philosophy that he's putting forward, that the way you create growth is by stealing from the rich and giving to the poor.
The president's 10-year spending plan also goes over federal spending caps, which were agreed to by both parties, by nearly $500 billion.
I'm going to keep fighting to make sure that every American has the chance not just to share in America's success, but to contribute to America's success. That's what this budget is about.
Democratic leaders call it a forward-looking and fiscally responsible plan, but the Republican majority disagrees. And critics say the president wrote his budget as though the November election that ushered in a new Republican majority on the Hill never happened.
This was an in-your-face budget that said, you know, we're going to go ahead with our liberal agenda. We don't care what the voters say. We don't care what the conservative Republican majority in Congress says. We're going to move aggressively forward with this.
The president has introduced some of these ideas before, and they failed, even when Democrats controlled the Senate. And another big issue is that the president's spending plan doesn't even try to balance the budget. Speaker John Boehner says this plan never balances, ever. It contains no solutions to address the drivers of our debt and no plan to fix our entire tax code to help foster growth and create jobs. Worse yet, President Obama would impose new taxes and more spending without a responsible plan to honestly address the big challenges facing our country.
The president talks about how fiscally responsible it is, and yet it would continue to raise our national debt by another $5 trillion over the next 5 years, and over the next decade. Now that's on top of the $7 trillion addition to the debt we've already had in the first 6 years of President Obama. That's not going to cut it with the American people.
Republican budget writers promised to pass a spending plan of their own that's balanced. They have until April 15th to do so. Voters who sent them to Washington will be watching. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
Owners of a bakery in Oregon are being ordered to pay a lesbian couple damages after declining to bake a cake for their same-sex wedding. A hearing is scheduled in March to determine how much the owners will have to pay. The judge says the bakers unlawfully discriminated against the couple by denying them full and equal access to a place of public accommodations. Owners Aaron and Melissa Klein say they don't have a problem serving gays and lesbians, but because of their religious beliefs, they can't make a cake celebrating a same-sex wedding.
First Amendment, Constitution, freedom of religion. I'm free to exercise my religion however I see fit. I should not be compelled to violate my conscience. If I am told that I have to make a wedding cake for a same-sex marriage, I feel that I'm violating my beliefs. I don't think I should have to do that.
The Kleins say they had to close their bakery after being boycotted. Investigators for the State Bureau of Labor and Industries have recommended the Kleins each pay $75,000 in damages.
Doctors across the country are dealing with a measles outbreak, mostly among children. The scare's even generating debate among possible Republican presidential candidates, several of them defending the freedom of Americans to choose whether or not to vaccinate. As Lori Johnson tells us, the battle over the disease is sparking new calls for vaccination to stop the spread of this terrible virus.
Health officials confirmed measles cases at California's Disneyland, then across the country in New York on an Amtrak train from Penn Station to Niagara Falls. In all, nearly 100 cases have been reported in 14 states. Doctors caution measles is extremely easy to catch.
It's so contagious that if somebody has measles and they're in a room and breathing because it's spread by air droplets, and then they leave the room and an unimmunized person walks into that same room 2 hours later, there's a 90% chance that they're going to get infected.
While measles is highly contagious, it's also highly preventable, thanks to the measles vaccine. It's called MMR because in addition to measles, it also protects against mumps and rubella. Most daycares and schools require students to prove they've gotten their MMR shot before entering the classroom. But it's easy to get an exemption. and more parents are choosing to opt out of getting their child vaccinated for religious or philosophical reasons.
We should be fully informed with what exactly is in each and every injection that goes into our child's body.
It's a controversy that's growing between parents across the nation.
If you want to have your children associate with other children in publicly funded places like public schools, you should have them inoculated. It shouldn't be a choice. You should have to have that because you're putting everybody else at danger.
Symptoms of measles include the telltale red blotchy skin rash, also a cough, runny nose, and fever. Measles can lead to ear infection, pneumonia, and in rare cases, death. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
Many packaged meals and snacks for toddlers have a worrisome amount of salt and sugar, and that could give them a taste at a young age for foods that can lead to obesity and other health risks. That is according to a new study from the Centers for Disease Control. The CDC studied more than 1,000 foods marketed for infants and toddlers, including popular brands of baby food, cereal bars, breakfast pastries, toddler dinners, mini hot dogs, rice cakes, crackers, dried fruit snacks, and yogurt treats. The study notes almost 1 in 4 children between the ages of 2 and 5 are overweight or obese. The survey was done on foods available in 2012. Grocery Manufacturers of America now says more foods have come out on the market that have less sodium in them. The CDC still advises parents to read labels carefully and choose those healthier choices.
Michael Medved, a popular conservative radio host, has stage 3 cancer. Medved made the announcement Friday during his radio show and on his website. He said he'll be taking a break from the broadcast while he undergoes treatment. He wrote, "I always knew that it would take something serious to keep me away from the microphone I cherish for an extended period of time. As it turns out, I am facing something serious. It's called cancer." Medved was diagnosed in the middle of December and began treatment immediately. He says his prognosis of a full recovery is good.
I told my sons we will overcome this adversity. We were given a second chance to live, and that's why we will overcome this.
We're showing you how CBN is helping victims of Typhoon Haiyan recover more than a year after the storm devastated the Philippines.
We're seeing new images of Cuba's Fidel Castro for the first time in 5 months. The government published 10 online images of the 88-year-old former leader. Castro is shown talking to a college student. The meeting is said to have taken place nearly 2 weeks ago. The photos were released around midnight on Monday. The last published images of Castro were of Castro talking with Venezuela's president back in August.
CBN's disaster relief teams have been ministering to victims of the devastating Typhoon Haiyan for more than a year now. Their latest project is an organic farm, and it's helping countless families earn a livelihood. George Thomas brings us the story now from the Philippines.
Nympha Babula knows how fortunate she is to be alive today.
Nothing was left of our possessions. Our house was destroyed. All our belongings gone.
A year ago, the world's most powerful storm to ever hit land slammed into the Philippines, killing thousands.
I told my sons we will overcome this adversity. We were given a second chance to live, and that's why we will overcome this.
In a small village not too far from her destroyed community, Babula and 60 other Filipino families are putting that spirit to work at a unique CBN disaster relief organic farm.
We learn about hard work and the techniques of organic farming. And of course, when you plant, you will harvest. And that's why I'm so happy to be part of this project.
The farm is a first of its kind in this region.
We plant tomatoes, potatoes, chilies, peppers, corn, bitter melon, string beans. We use no chemicals, and so we are able to teach the people to eat what is good for their bodies.
The goal is to give families who've lost everything a sustainable livelihood that can also build self-confidence.
People have a mindset that they cannot do it, but we are teaching and giving them agriculture training so they will learn how to earn a living. And now that they have harvested, they are happy.
As a single mother of 6, Babula was struggling to put food on the table before the typhoon hit.
I used to sell food that I cooked in the market, but I was not earning that much money.
But now trips to the market have taken on new significance.
I can't wait to bring the vegetables to the market. Thank you very much, CBN. Because of your help, we are able to stand again. In time, I know that our farm will become bigger and we will earn more. Thank you for giving us hope.
And judging from the huge success of this project, CBN Disaster Relief is planning to start a piggery, poultry, and fish farm.
It is not enough to give houses to victims of the typhoon. We need to give them means of livelihood. And that's what's happening with this farm. We help them get up on their feet, assure their sustainability, and help them build back better.
George Thomas, CBN News, Palo Leyte, Philippines.
Up next, the problem of porn and why it's so addictive. Meet former porn addicts who've come clean in church.
Hey everybody, I'm Lori Johnson in the CBN Newsroom. I do health reports to keep you living well for a long time. You know, February is American Heart Month, and so now is a great time to talk about how to avoid getting heart disease. And what's really interesting is doctors are now saying it's not high cholesterol that causes heart disease, but rather inflammation. And what that means to you and me is it's now okay to eat foods like eggs, butter, coconut oil, the saturated fats that we've been told to avoid. But what we really need to stay away from, the foods that really damage our heart, are things that contain sugar, white bread, and vegetable oil. You can read all about this on my Healthy Living blog on our website, cbnnews.com.
Pornography. The church may be the last place you'd expect to hear about it, but one Florida pastor says it's time for leaders to wake up and fight back against this scourge.
So he's doing just that. He is bringing the problem to light within the walls of his very own church. Paul Strand brings us a compelling story.
Jay Dennis is sounding an alarm about a mostly unseen epidemic swamping Christianity.
I believe that 80% of men in churches are struggling at some level with viewing pornography.
Yet he says most pastors either don't believe it or won't take action.
One of the biggest scandals about this addiction that very likely has, well, more than half of the church in its clutches is how few churches are willing to talk about it in the open and tackle it.
Trina Mewborn, director of counseling at Lakeland's First Baptist Church, says that inaction plays into the devil's plan to make believers feel isolated.
Nobody in this church understands. Nobody struggles with this. Look at me. I am really a pervert, or I am really this deviant.
Their church is meeting the struggle head-on with a helpful book series and a DVD featuring church members who were addicted or are in the fight against porn.
I really feel like the thing that pornography does is it keeps you really locked, almost like a slave, in secret.
I was scared and I was ashamed and I was fearful that if I ever told anyone what I was going through, that they would not understand, or they would think I was a freak of nature.
But imagine if you had an entire church full of brothers or sisters who you could go to, confess to, get support from them.
You hear, you know, this shouldn't be talked about in church, and it's exactly where it needs to be talked about. It needs to be brought to the light, because when it's brought to the light, it can be healed.
You're not alone. This is a problem everywhere, every church.
It's why Pastor Dennis wants to get at least 1 million Christian men to pledge at his Pink Elephant Resources website they'll live porn-free. He says a watershed moment for his church came one night when he asked his men to stand up if they were struggling with porn.
We have theater seats, so I remember with my eyes closed and I was listening, I could hear all these seats hitting the backs of the seat. And I said, when I heard that, it sounded like chains were snapping.
Dennis believes the public confession and recovery of those addicts and near addicts brought revival to his church. His director of counseling feels that result could happen at any church willing to join the fray.
Churches need to see, hey, we have got to be the hospital. I mean, we've got to be the ones saying we are going to figure out how to help people and be real with people.
Dennis maintains, however, it's up to the individual Christian to make the life-saving decision.
No man goes into this knowing that, hey, I know I'm going to destroy my life, I'm going to wreck my marriage, I'm going to ruin my testimony. I don't think any Christian man goes into it like that, but that is the result of this.
Greg Dyer's addiction followed him into his marriage.
That was always a part of my life, pornography was. Even once I met Kathy, that pornography was still a part of my life. And then that led to years of lying to her.
Despite his Christianity, the X-rated material led him to move out on Kathy and into an affair with a coworker.
I viewed women as sex objects instead of women, someone else's daughter. And so when the girl made herself available to me, it wasn't that big of a stretch.
After 7 years of marriage, Kathy couldn't believe it when she found out about Greg's double life.
It was very shocking for me. It took a long time for me to just absorb that this was Greg.
She realized the seriousness of his problem after studying how porn is as addictive as any drug.
As far as the synapses firing in your brain when you look at a pornographic image or when you use cocaine, for instance, there's really not much of a difference.
The exact same chemical reaction happens in the brain when a person is addicted to pornography every time they view it that happens in a heroin addict when they do a hit of heroin.
Greg got desperate, though, when he heard God say he was no longer going to protect him.
I knew what the presence of God was in my life, and at that point, it was gone. And it scared me. It scared straight, basically.
Through months of painful counseling and struggle, the Dyers eventually put their marriage back together.
I think I started to see Greg through God's eyes. That's really kind of what happened.
Kathy wrote a book with Pastor Dennis about how Christian wives can help their husbands find freedom. And Greg testifies there was nothing sweeter than getting porn free.
It owned me for a majority of my life, and I don't feel like it owned me anymore.
Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from Lakeland, Florida.
And finally this hour, CBN and CBN's Orphans Promise are helping refugees in war-torn eastern Ukraine.
Teams of volunteers have been helping locals with evacuation arrangements, medical assistance, clean water, and other essential items. And in some cases, they've helped residents get back to their homes and reconstruct. Teams have evacuated roughly 2,000 people and made several trips to the front line zone to provide food, water, medicine, diapers, warm clothes, and shoes. You can find out more about what CBN is doing around the world by logging on to cbn.com/international. That's it for now on CBN News Today. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care about most at cbnnews.com.
And take the time to tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Certainly hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make it a terrific Tuesday, everybody.